My phone pinged with a text from my daughter-in-law. Found you a cleaning job with my boss. 15 hours, 6 days a week. David says this way you'll earn your keep while living with us. My fingers trembled as I set down my teacup. Just yesterday, my son had looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, I love you, but I won't feed extra mouths. This arrangement is temporary. After 45 years of raising him alone and putting him through college, I was now an extra mouth." I smiled and thanked my daughter-in-law for the opportunity. But the next day, when I discovered what they'd really been planning, everything changed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started with a conversation I overheard at the senior center. I hadn't planned to visit the Riverside Community Center that Tuesday morning. In fact, I'd told Rebecca I was going to the library to look for books on résumé writing. At 73, I hadn't updated mine in nearly a decade. But the library was unexpectedly closed for renovations, and the community center was just across the street. I thought perhaps they might have resources for seniors seeking employment. The center was housed in a converted Victorian mansion, its wooden floors creaking pleasantly beneath my feet as I walked through the entrance hall. Cheerful watercolor paintings lined the walls, most created by the center's art class participants. A bulletin board near the reception desk was covered with flyers advertising everything from line dancing to tax preparation assistance. Was examining one about computer skills for seniors when I overheard two women talking in the adjacent sitting room. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their conversation carried clearly through the open doorway. "She's completely exhausted, Martha," said a voice I couldn't see. "Elaine calls me crying at least once a week." I peered around the corner. A woman with short gray hair sat in an armchair speaking to another woman, Martha, presumably, who had her back to me. Martha had elegant silver hair pulled into a neat bun and wore a purple cardigan that looked hand-knitted. Poor Elaine moved in with her son after her husband died, Martha explained to a third woman who I now realized was the center's activity coordinator. Next thing you know, they've got her working as free childcare for the grandkids, cooking every meal and cleaning that massive house. When she tried to take a day off because her arthritis was flaring up, her son suggested maybe it was time she look into more affordable living arrangements. Can you believe it? Using your own mother like an unpaid servant? The coordinator, a younger woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Jennifer, shook her head sympathetically. That's happening more than you'd think. Just last month, we had a woman come in for our financial literacy class. Her children had drained her retirement account to pay for a vacation home they promised she could use any time. She hasn't seen the place once in 3 years. It's a disgrace, said the first woman. These children were raised better than that. Elaine put her son through dental school, for heaven's sake. Now he's making 6 figures and he can't even let his mother rest her arthritic hands? I stood frozen in the doorway, feeling a strange chill despite the warmth of the building. The story struck too close to home, echoing the discomfort I'd been feeling but couldn't quite name. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into the room. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm new to the area and was wondering if you have any resources for seniors who might need advice about family situations." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of surprise and warmth. Martha smiled first. "You've come to the right place, dear. I'm Martha Kingsley. This is Doris Wilson, and Jennifer runs most of the programs here." "I'm Eleanor Walsh," I replied, taking a seat in the circle they motioned me toward. "I recently moved in with my son and his family after selling my house in New Jersey." "How long ago was that?" asked Doris, her eyes narrowing slightly with what I would soon learn was her natural perception. 4 months, I admitted. "And how's that working out for you?" There was no judgment in her tone, just genuine interest. I hesitated. These were strangers after all. But there was something about their open faces, perhaps the solidarity of women who had lived long enough to recognize life's patterns that made me feel I could speak freely. At first, it was wonderful, I began. My son David and his wife Rebecca were so welcoming. They insisted I come live with them instead of wasting money on my house in Maplewood. I have my own room, and my 2 granddaughters are delightful. But lately, I trailed off, uncertain how to express the subtle shift that had occurred. Martha nodded encouragingly. Things have changed? It's nothing dramatic, I hurried to clarify. Just little comments about how much the heating costs when I turn it up in my room, how groceries are so expensive now. Last night, David said he can't feed extra mouths indefinitely, and suggested I get a job to contribute to household expenses. The 3 women exchanged glances. "And what did you say to that?" Jennifer asked gently. I agreed, I admitted, feeling a flush of embarrassment. This morning, my daughter-in-law texted me about a cleaning job with her boss, 6 days a week. Doris let out a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "At your age? With those hands?" She gestured to my fingers, which I now realized I was unconsciously massaging. The arthritis was acting up again, the joints swollen and slightly red. "It doesn't seem unreasonable to contribute," I said defensively. "They've given me a place to stay." "Eleanor," Martha said, leaning forward, "may I ask what happened to the money from your house sale?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. "David helped me invest most of it. He's a financial advisor, quite successful. He said it was better to have it working for me than sitting in a checking account." Another meaningful glance passed between the women. "And do you have access to those investment accounts?" Jennifer asked. "Do you receive statements?" I hadn't thought about it, truthfully. "David handles all that. He knows what he's doing." "I'm sure he does," Martha said, her tone carefully neutral. "But it's always good to stay informed about your own finances." Jennifer stood up and walked to a nearby bookshelf. She returned with several pamphlets, which she handed to me. "These might be helpful. We have a financial literacy class for seniors every Thursday. And this one," she pointed to a purple brochure, "explains different types of elder exploitation." "Just as information," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "My son wouldn't exploit me," I said firmly, though a seed of doubt had begun to take root. "He's just concerned about finances, which is understandable. The economy isn't what it used to be." "Of course," Martha said soothingly, "but knowledge is power, as they say. And speaking of power, we have a wonderful Tai Chi class starting in 15 minutes. Perfect for arthritis, why don't you join us?" That's how I found myself an hour later, moving slowly through ancient Chinese movements in a room full of strangers who somehow already felt like friends. My joints were indeed less painful by the end, but my mind was far from peaceful. When the class ended, Martha invited me to join her and Doris for lunch at the center's cafe. Over soup and sandwiches that cost half what they would at any restaurant, I learned that Martha was a retired librarian who had been widowed for 12 years, and Doris had been a civil rights attorney who never married but had adopted 2 children. In her 40s. Both doctors now, she said proudly. They don't live nearby, but they call me every Sunday without fail, and they've set up my finances so I'm completely independent. "That's wonderful," I said, feeling a pang of envy at her. "Confidence and security." "It is," she agreed. "But it didn't happen by accident. I made sure they understood from a young age that I was their mother, not their maid or their bank. I must have looked stricken because Martha patted my hand. Everyone's situation is different, Eleanor. We're not judging yours." "But you have concerns," I said quietly. "Let's just say we've seen patterns," Martha replied. "And we've lived long enough to know that family dynamics can be complicated, especially when money's involved," Doris added bluntly. By the time I left the community center, my mind was buzzing with questions I'd never thought to ask. I had Martha's phone number programmed into my cell phone and a promise to return for the financial literacy class on Thursday. I walked slowly back to David and Rebecca's house, my thoughts churning. The neighborhood was undeniably beautiful. Tree-lined streets with immaculate lawns, colonial and Tudor-style homes set back from the sidewalk. David and Rebecca's house was one of the largest on the block, a sprawling Tudor with leaded glass windows and a 3-car garage. A far cry from the modest split level I'd raised him in as a single mother after his father abandoned us when David was just 7. I'd worked 2 jobs sometimes, my teaching position during the day and tutoring or retail work in the evenings to make sure David had everything he needed. I'd scrimped and saved to pay for his college, determined he would graduate without the burden of student loans. I'd attended every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, cooked healthy meals even when exhausted, helped with homework, nursed him through illnesses, celebrated his achievements, and consoled him through disappointments. Never once had I considered any of it a burden. He was my son, my responsibility, my joy. Now, at 73, was it so wrong to expect a little consideration in return? As I approached the house, I noticed Rebecca's sleek white SUV in the driveway. She worked from home most days in her converted office space, meeting clients there or at their homes. She was expecting me to respond to her text about the cleaning job, I realized. I straightened my shoulders and walked up the brick pathway to the front door. The house key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door and stepped into the marble-floored foyer. "Is that you, Eleanor?" Rebecca called from her office just off the main hallway. "Yes, dear," I replied, hanging my coat in the closet. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in a beige cashmere sweater and tailored pants, her highlighted blonde hair falling in artful layers around her face. At 42, she was closer to my son's age than to his teenage daughters from his first marriage. David and Rebecca had been married for 6 years. "Did you get my text?" she asked, a bright smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I did," I said. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Mrs. Harrington is just wonderful," Rebecca continued enthusiastically. "Her house is gorgeous. You'd love it. All antiques and original artwork. And she's very particular, so it would be a good fit for someone like you who appreciates fine things." "It's very thoughtful," I said carefully. "When would she want me to start?" "Tomorrow." Rebecca clapped her hands together. "Isn't that perfect? She's having a dinner party this weekend and needs the house spotless. I told her you'd be there by 8 a.m. The address is in my text." I blinked, taken aback by the presumption. I haven't actually agreed to take the job yet, Rebecca. I was going to think about it." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh. Well, what's there to think about? It's a great opportunity, and David and I really think it would be good for you to get out of the house, earn your keep a little." She laughed, as if she'd made a joke. "I understand that," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'd like to look into some other options as well. Maybe something less physically demanding." Rebecca's expression cooled perceptibly. "Like what? No offense, Eleanor, but you don't exactly have a lot of current job skills, and Mrs. Harrington is willing to pay cash, which means you won't have to deal with taxes or affect your Social Security." The implication that I should work under the table didn't sit well with me. I'd paid my taxes dutifully every year of my working life. "I'll think about it overnight," I said, not wanting to provoke a confrontation. "How was your day otherwise?" Rebecca launched into a detailed account of a difficult client who couldn't decide between 2 nearly identical shades of gray for her. Dining room. I made appropriate noises of sympathy while my mind worked through what I'd learned at the community center. That evening, David came home later than usual, after the girls and I had already eaten dinner. I'd made a chicken casserole, enough for everyone, with leftovers, and David heaped a generous portion onto his plate. "This is good, Mom," he said between bites. "At least we're saving on takeout with you here." I wasn't sure if it was meant as a compliment or another reminder of my financial impact on the household. "David," I said, deciding to address the matter directly, I've been thinking about what you said last night about getting a job. He looked up from his plate. Rebecca mentioned Mrs. Harrington's offer. That was quick work. Actually, I'm not sure cleaning houses is the right fit for me, I said. My arthritis. Mom, he interrupted, his tone suddenly serious. We need to be practical here. You're living in our home, eating our food, using our utilities. The money from your house sale won't last forever, especially in this market. You need to contribute something. I understand that, I said. But perhaps there are other options. That would better suit my experience and physical capabilities. I was a teacher for 35 years. David sighed heavily. The schools around here aren't hiring retired teachers from out of state, Mom. They have their own retiree substitute pool. And frankly, most places aren't looking to hire someone your age. Mrs. Harrington is doing us a favor. Us? I echoed. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. You know what I mean. She's giving you an opportunity when most wouldn't. I felt a flicker of the indignation I'd suppressed all day. David, I raised you on my own. I put you through college without a penny of student loans. I supported every dream you ever had. Is it really too much to ask that you support me a little in my old age? His expression hardened. I am supporting you, Mom. You're living in my house, aren't you? But times are tough, and we have the girls' college funds to think about, and the market's been volatile. We just can't afford another dependent right now. Dependent. The word stung like a slap. I see. Look, he said, his tone softening slightly. It's not forever. Just until we get through this tight spot. A few months of helping out financially, and then we can reassess. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak further. David seemed to take my silence as agreement and returned his attention to his dinner. Later that evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat at the small desk in my bedroom and opened my laptop. The pamphlets from the community center lay beside me. I began to research elder financial abuse, exploitation by family members, and seniors' rights. What I read both horrified and empowered me. Stories like mine were alarmingly common. Adult. Children inviting aging parents to move in, only to appropriate their assets, use them for free labor, or pressure them into handing over retirement funds. The psychological manipulation, the subtle erosion of independence, the gradual isolation from friends and support systems, it all sounded disturbingly familiar. I thought about the money from my house sale, nearly $380,000 that David had quickly moved into investment accounts I had no direct access to. I thought about the way he and Rebecca discouraged me from looking at senior apartments, always finding some flaw in each one I mentioned. I thought about how they'd convinced me to leave behind most of my furniture and keepsakes, saying they wouldn't fit in their home but promising to store them, only to later tell me they'd donated everything to charity because storage was too expensive. My hand trembled as I typed an email to the address provided in one of the pamphlets, a free legal aid service for seniors. I described my situation as objectively as I could, asking what options might be available to me. Next, I searched for online banking access to the investment accounts David had set up. I had signed papers, after all. Somewhere there had to be account numbers, passwords, something that would let me see what was happening with my money. After an hour of searching, through my email and the few financial documents I'd kept, I found nothing. David had managed the entire process, had me sign papers without copies, and kept all the details to himself. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I was about to close my laptop when a new email notification appeared. It was from someone named Sarah Chen at the Legal Aid Service, responding already at nearly midnight. Her message was brief but reassuring. Mrs. Walsh, what you're describing has several red flags for financial exploitation. Please call our office tomorrow at 9 a.m. We can discuss your options confidentially and at no cost. In the meantime, don't sign anything new and, if possible, try to locate any documentation related to your assets. Sarah Chen, Elder Justice Legal Services. I sat back, my heart pounding. Was I really considering legal action against my own son? The thought seemed unthinkable, yet the evidence was mounting that something wasn't right. My phone pinged with another text from Rebecca. Mrs. Harrington is expecting you at 8 a.m. sharp. Wear something presentable, but that you don't mind getting dirty. David and I are so proud of you for taking this step. I set the phone down without responding. Instead, I opened my banking app and checked my personal checking account, the only financial account I still controlled independently. The balance was lower than I expected. I scrolled through recent transactions and froze when I saw several withdrawals I didn't recognize. $200 here, $300 there, always in cash, over the past 3 months. My hands were shaking now. I'd never made those withdrawals. Someone had been using my ATM card, and there was only one possibility: the spare card I kept in my desk drawer, which I now discovered was missing. I closed my eyes, struggling to control the wave of betrayal and anger that threatened to overwhelm me. After everything I'd sacrificed for David, after all the love I'd given him, this was how he repaid me? By stealing from me? By treating me as a burden, an extra mouth to feed? I thought of Martha and Doris at the senior center, their dignity and independence intact. I thought of my late husband Henry, who would be furious if he could see how our son was treating me. And I thought of myself, Eleanor Walsh, who had faced single parenthood, economic hardship, and widowhood with courage and resilience. I was not going to become another Elaine, working her fingers to the bone for ungrateful children who saw her as nothing but free labor and a source of funds. Tomorrow would not find me cleaning Mrs. Harrington's antiques for cash under the table. Tomorrow would find me taking the first steps toward reclaiming my independence, my dignity, and my future. I shut down my laptop, crawled into bed, and for the first time in months, slept soundly with the clarity of my new resolve. What I didn't know then was that the next day would bring a discovery so shocking, it would change everything I thought I knew about my son and the life I'd built. I woke before dawn the next morning, my mind clear and focused in a way it hadn't been for months. The house was silent, everyone else still asleep. I dressed quickly in comfortable clothes, definitely not the cleaning outfit Rebecca had suggested, and packed a small bag with essentials: my laptop, phone charger, medication, and the few pieces of jewelry I still possessed after the downsizing of my belongings. In the kitchen, I made a pot of coffee and sat at the counter, contemplating my next steps. The digital clock on the microwave read 5:47 a.m. I had just over 3 hours before my supposed appointment with Mrs. Harrington, and just over 2 hours before David and Rebecca would expect to see me at breakfast. Dutiful and compliant, I didn't intend to be there. My first instinct had been to confront David about the unauthorized withdrawals from my account. But years of teaching had taught me the value of gathering all the facts before taking action. I needed more information, and I needed to ensure my remaining assets were secure before tipping my hand. At 6:30 a.m., I quietly slipped out the front door and called for a rideshare. The car arrived within minutes, driven by a pleasant woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Ginny. "Early appointment?" she asked as I settled into the back seat. "Something like that," I replied. "The Riverside Community Center, please." "Ooh, they have a fantastic breakfast there on Wednesdays," Ginny said. "The blueberry pancakes are worth getting up early for." I hadn't known about the breakfast, but it solved the immediate problem of what to do until the legal aid office opened. At 9 Tau. "That sounds perfect," I said. Ginny chatted amiably during the 15-minute drive, telling me about her grandchildren and how she'd started driving part-time after retirement, just to keep busy and have some mad money. "My daughter wanted me to move in with them," she confided. "But I told her, honey, I love you, but I like my independence too much. Now I visit every Sunday for dinner, and everyone's happier that way." Her words reinforced my growing conviction that I needed to reclaim my autonomy, whatever that might entail. The community center was already bustling when we arrived. A sign in the entrance hall announced, Wednesday breakfast special, blueberry pancakes and fellowship, 7 to 9 a.m. I followed the aroma of coffee and maple syrup to a large dining room where tables were arranged in a horseshoe pattern, encouraging conversation. I spotted Martha almost immediately, sitting with Doris and several other people I didn't recognize. She waved me over enthusiastically. "Eleanor, what a lovely surprise. Join us, please." I set my bag down and took the empty chair beside her. "I didn't know about the breakfast," I admitted. "It was a happy accident." "Best kept secret in Charlotte," said a white-haired gentleman across the table. "I'm Walter Stevens. My friends call me Walt." Introductions went around the table. Besides Martha, Doris, and Walt, there was Louisa, a retired nurse, Jim, a former high school principal, and Beverly, who announced herself as, "Just Beverly, darling. I've had too many last names to bother with them anymore." The pancakes were indeed delicious, but the conversation was the real nourishment. These people spoke to each other, and to me, with a respect and attentiveness I'd nearly forgotten existed. They asked questions and listened to the answers. They disagreed without dismissing. They shared without dominating. It was during a lull in the general conversation that Martha leaned toward me. "You seem different today, Eleanor. More determined." Hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "I did some research last night," I said quietly, "and I discovered some disturbing things about my financial situation." Martha's expression grew serious. "I suspected as much. What will you do?" "I have an appointment with legal aid at 9. After that, I'm not sure yet." She squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, we're here. Right, Doris?" Doris, who had been listening discreetly, nodded. "Damn straight. Nobody messes with one of ours." "One of yours?" I echoed, startled. "But we just met yesterday." "Sometimes that's all it takes to recognize kindred spirits," Martha said simply. At 8:45, I excused myself and made my way to the community center's office wing where the legal aid service had a weekly satellite location. My phone had been buzzing periodically, first Rebecca, then David, increasingly demanding to know where I was. I had responded with a single text. "Taking care of some personal business. We'll be in touch later." The Elder Justice Legal Services. Office was small but welcoming, with comfortable chairs and walls lined with informational posters. A young woman looked up from a desk as I entered. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm Sarah Chen. We spoke via email last night." Sarah was perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses and a manner that balanced professionalism with warmth. She ushered me into a private consultation room and spent the next hour listening intently as I detailed my situation. The sale of my house, the move to David's, the gradual shift in how I was treated, the discovery of unauthorized withdrawals from my account, and my inability to access the investment accounts holding the bulk of my assets. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and never once made me feel foolish or overly dramatic. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Walsh, based on what you've told me, there are several serious concerns here. The unauthorized withdrawals from your checking account are straightforward theft. The investment accounts are more complicated. But if your son moved your money without providing you proper access or information, that could constitute financial exploitation under North Carolina law." "I signed papers," I admitted, "but I never received copies and I don't have access codes." "Do you remember what you signed? Were they account applications, powers of attorney, trust documents?" I struggled to recall. David had presented so many papers explaining them as standard or just formalities. "I'm not sure," I said finally. "He told me they were investment account applications, but there were so many pages." Sarah nodded. "That's not uncommon in these situations. What we need to do first is freeze your checking account to prevent further unauthorized withdrawals." Then we need to trace what's happened to your house proceeds. Do you have your account numbers with you? I did, and within the hour, Sarah had helped me contact my bank to report the fraudulent withdrawals and request a freeze on my account except for transactions I conducted in person at a branch with ID. She also drafted a formal letter to David demanding complete information about all accounts opened with my funds, with copies to be sent to regulatory authorities if he failed to comply. Within 48 hours. Where will you stay tonight? She asked as our meeting concluded. I don't recommend returning to your son's house until we have a clearer picture of the situation. I hadn't thought that far ahead. The realization that I was essentially homeless hit me with unexpected force. I don't know, I admitted. A hotel, I suppose, though that will deplete my remaining accessible funds pretty quickly. Sarah looked thoughtful. We have emergency housing vouchers for seniors in situations like yours, but there's usually a waiting list. Let me make a call. She stepped out of the office briefly, returning with a smile. Good news. The center's director says you can use their transitional apartment for a few days. It's small, but comfortable, right here in the building. They keep it for emergency situations. Relief washed over me. That's incredibly kind. I don't know how to thank you all. You can thank us by taking care of yourself and getting justice, Sarah said firmly. Now let's get you settled and then think about next steps. The transitional apartment turned out to be a cozy one-bedroom unit on the center's 3rd floor, formerly the servants' quarters when the building was a private residence. It was simply furnished but spotlessly clean, with a kitchenette, bathroom, and living area with a pull-out sofa. Jennifer, the activities coordinator I'd met the day before, brought up fresh linens and toiletries. It's not the Ritz, she apologized, but it's safe and quiet. It's perfect, I assured her. I can't thank you enough for this kindness. We've all been where you are in one way or another, she said. The center was founded by a woman who escaped an abusive marriage in her 60s and had nowhere to go. She vowed no senior in Charlotte would ever face that kind of crisis alone. Again. Once Jennifer left, I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. My phone showed 7 missed calls from David and a string of increasingly agitated texts. Mom, where are you? Mrs. Harrington is waiting. This is extremely unprofessional. Call me immediately. Rebecca is worried sick. Are you having a medical episode? If you don't respond in the next hour, we're calling the police to report you missing. The last one made me laugh bitterly. Now he was concerned about my welfare? I typed a brief response. I am safe. I am taking some time to myself. I will be in touch when I'm ready. Then I turned off my phone. I needed clarity, not guilt trips. I spent the afternoon with Sarah Chen and a financial investigator from the county's Elder Protection Services. Together, they helped me piece together what had likely happened to my money. Based on the timing of my house sale and the few documents I had retained, they suspected David had opened accounts in both our names, joint accounts that would give him full access. The problem with joint accounts, the investigator explained, is that either party can legally withdraw all the funds. If your son has moved the money elsewhere, it could be challenging to recover. But I never intended to create joint accounts. I protested. I thought he was setting up accounts for me that he would help manage, not ones he could control. That's where the exploitation comes in, Sarah explained. If he misrepresented what you were signing or took advantage of your trust, to gain control of your assets, that's financial abuse. The investigator nodded. We see this pattern frequently, unfortunately. Adult children convince aging parents they're helping manage finances, but actually gain control of the assets. Sometimes they genuinely believe they're entitled to the money as an early inheritance. What can we do? I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. First, we formally request information about all accounts opened with your funds, Sarah said. If David refuses to provide that information, we escalate to regulatory authorities and possibly criminal charges. We also need to secure what assets you still control and ensure you have income for your immediate needs. The investigator added, "Your Social Security should be unaffected, but we need to make sure those payments are going to an account only you can access. Do you have any other sources of income or assets we haven't discussed?" I thought for a moment. "My teacher's pension. It's not large, but it's reliable, and—" I hesitated, then continued. "There's my late husband's life insurance policy. I never touched that money. It's in a certificate of deposit at First National. David doesn't know about it." This revelation seemed to please them. "That's excellent," Sarah said. "Having resources your son isn't aware of gives us more options." By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted, but had a concrete plan in place. I would remain at the community center for at least 3 days. During that time, Sarah would send the formal demand letter to David and begin the process of tracking my missing assets. The financial investigator would help me access my previously unknown CD and set up new, secure accounts for my pension and Social Security. "What about my belongings?" I asked. Most of what I owned was sold or donated when I moved in with David, but I still have clothes, some photos, my mother's china. "Let's wait on that," Sarah advised. "Once David receives our letter, things might get tense. It's better if you're not there. We can request a police escort for you to retrieve essential items later if necessary." I nodded, though the thought of needing police protection to enter my son's home was surreal and painful. That evening, Martha and Doris insisted I join them for dinner in the center's cafe. By then, word had spread about my situation. Not the details, but enough for people to understand I was in transition and needed support. "You'll stay for Friday game night, won't you?" asked Walt as he stopped by our table. "We're short a fourth for canasta. I haven't played in years," I demurred. "Perfect time to relearn," he said with a wink before moving on. "He's sweet on you," Doris observed after he left. "Don't be ridiculous," I said, feeling a flush rise in my cheeks. "We just met." "So? We're old, not dead," Martha laughed. "Besides, Walt's a good man. Took care of his wife through 10 years of Alzheimer's without a word of complaint." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and for a while, I was able to forget the painful situation with my son. These people, virtual strangers just days ago, had shown me more respect and kindness than my own family recently had. That night, in the small but comfortable bed of the transitional apartment, I cried for the first time since discovering David's betrayal. Not just for the money, which was significant but ultimately replaceable, but for the broken trust. For the son I thought I knew. For the future I had imagined. Holidays together, watching my granddaughters grow up, being part of a loving family in my final years. Had I failed as a mother somehow? Had I raised a son who valued money over morality? Convenience over compassion? Or had society's materialism corrupted the sweet boy who once made me handmade Mother's Day cards and promised to buy me a castle when he grew up? I fell asleep with these questions still swirling, tears drying on my pillow. The next morning, I awoke to a knock on my door. Jennifer stood there with a cordless phone. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Eleanor, but there's an urgent call at the front desk. It's your granddaughter, Emma. She sounds upset." My heart raced as I took the phone. "Emma? Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "Grandma." Her voice was small and frightened. "Where are you? Dad's super mad, and he and Rebecca keep fighting, and nobody will tell us what's going on." Emma was 15, the older of my granddaughters. Sophie was 13. Both girls lived primarily with their mother, David's ex-wife Karen, but stayed with David and Rebecca every other weekend and Wednesdays. "I'm staying with some friends for a few days," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. "Your dad and I had a disagreement about some grown-up things." "Is it because of the job? Dad said you were supposed to go clean someone's house, but you just disappeared instead." I winced at the oversimplification. "It's more complicated than—" That, honey, but you don't need to worry. Everything will be sorted out. Dad said you stole money from him and ran away, Emma continued, her voice trembling. He said you might be having memory problems and getting confused about things. Anger flared in my chest. How dare he lie to his children about me? Use them as pawns in his scheme? Emma, listen to me, I said firmly. I did not steal from your father. In fact, it's the other way around, and my memory is perfectly fine. Your father is saying these things because he's upset that I discovered what he was doing. What was he doing? She asked. I hesitated. These were children caught in an adult conflict. They didn't need all the sordid details. He was using money that belongs to me without my permission. I'm working with some people who help seniors with these kinds of problems. There was a pause. Then Emma said in a small voice, I believe you, Grandma. Dad's been weird about money stuff lately. Last month, he told Mom he couldn't pay for Sophie's braces because he was having cash flow issues. But then he and Rebecca went to Aruba the next week. My eyebrows shot up. This was new information. Emma, is your mother there? Could I speak with her? No, we're at Dad's for our Wednesday night. Mom doesn't know I'm calling you. I used Sophie's phone because Dad took mine away when I asked too many questions about where you went. This was getting worse by the minute. Emma, I don't want to put you in the middle of adult problems, but I want you to know that I love you, and Sophie very much, and nothing that's happening between your father and me changes that. I know, Grandma. Her voice sounded a little stronger. Oh, I think I hear Dad coming. I gotta go. Wait, Emma? But the line had already gone dead. I handed the phone back to Jennifer, my mind racing. I need to call my granddaughter's mother, I said. They're with my son tonight, but they're caught in the middle of this mess, and I'm worried about them. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. Use my office for privacy. I had Karen's number in my phone contacts. We'd always had a cordial relationship, even after her divorce from David 7 years ago. She answered on the third ring. Eleanor? Is everything all right? The girls mentioned you'd moved in with David and Rebecca. Karen, I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this, but there's a situation you should be aware of. I explained as succinctly as possible what had happened. David's financial exploitation, my departure from his house, and now his apparent attempts to turn the girls against me by claiming I was confused and had stolen from him. There was a long silence when I finished. Finally, Karen sighed heavily. I wish I could say I'm surprised, Eleanor, but I'm not. David's always been creative with financial truths. It's part of why our marriage ended. I had no idea, I said quietly. You wouldn't have. He was very careful to keep up appearances with you. But yes, he drained our joint accounts just before telling me he wanted a divorce. Claimed business losses that mysteriously disappeared when it came time for the settlement. My heart sank. So this wasn't new behavior, just new to me. I'm sorry, Karen. I truly had no idea. It's not your fault, she said kindly. You raised him to be better than that. Some people just make their own choices. Listen, about the girls, I'll pick them up from David's tonight instead of tomorrow. I don't want them in that environment if he's this upset. And you're welcome to see them anytime at my house. They adore you, you know. Tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know right now. After ending the call with Karen, I sat in Jennifer's office, processing this new information. David's financial dishonesty wasn't a recent development or a response to hardship. It was a pattern of behavior that predated my move to Charlotte. He hadn't targeted me out of desperation. He'd seen an opportunity and taken it, just as he had with Karen years earlier. The realization was both painful and clarifying. This wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed as a mother by trusting my son. He had failed as a son by betraying that trust. With renewed determination, I returned to the transitional apartment and turned my phone back on. As expected, there were more missed calls and texts from David, now alternating between threats and pleas. "Mom, whatever you think is happening, you're confused. Come home and we'll sort this out. If you've spoken to anyone about our private financial arrangements, you're making a huge mistake. Please, Mom, Rebecca is devastated. The girls are asking for you. We're your family. Don't let strangers turn you against us. And most recently, I've contacted the police. I'm reporting financial elder abuse against whoever is manipulating you. They'll be held legally responsible." That last one actually made me laugh out loud. The sheer audacity was almost admirable. I had just finished reading the messages when my phone rang again. David. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Where the hell are you?" he demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too, David," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm in a safe place." "What does that mean? What kind of game are you playing? Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" "I'm not playing games. And based on your recent actions, I doubt you've been worried about me so much as worried about the money." There was a moment of stunned silence before he switched tactics, his voice suddenly gentle, concerned. "Mom, I think you're confused. Maybe it's stress or medication. You haven't been yourself lately. Why don't you come home and we can talk about whatever's bothering you?" "What's bothering me," I said evenly, "is discovering unauthorized withdrawals from my checking account and being unable to access information about the investment accounts holding the proceeds from my house sale." Another pause. Longer this time. "Those withdrawals were for household expenses," he said finally. "Remember, we discussed you contributing, and those investment accounts are doing very well. I've been managing them expertly for you. Then you won't mind providing me with complete information about them. Account numbers, statements, online access." "Mom, that's not necessary. You know I'm handling everything." "Actually, I don't know that," I interrupted. "And until I have full information and control of my own assets, I won't be returning to your house." His tone changed again, anger seeping through the facade of concern. "You're being ridiculous. Where are you getting these ideas? Has someone been filling your head with nonsense? You know you can't manage these complex investments yourself. I managed to raise you on a teacher's salary, put you through college, and save enough to buy a house that sold for nearly $400,000, I reminded him. I think I can handle monitoring my own accounts." "Fine," he snapped. "I'll gather the information. But this paranoid behavior needs to stop. Rebecca and I have done nothing but try to help you, and this is how you repay us? By running off and making wild accusations?" "You'll be receiving a formal letter from my legal representative," I said, ignoring his attempt to make me feel guilty. "It outlines exactly what information is required and the timeline for providing it." "Legal representative?" he sputtered. "You've involved lawyers? My God, Mom, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time I protected myself and my future. Karen is picking up the girls tonight, by the way. I've spoken with her and she agrees they shouldn't be exposed to this situation." "You called Karen?" His voice rose in disbelief. "You had no right. She's their mother, David. And unlike you, she seems genuinely concerned about their well-being." That hit a nerve. "How dare you question my parenting? I've given those girls everything. Except honesty, apparently. Telling. Them I stole from you and am having memory problems? That's emotional manipulation and it stops now." There was a long silence. Then David's voice came back, cold and hard. "You've made a serious mistake, Mother. If you think Karen or some legal aid lawyer is going to help you, you're even more confused than I thought. I manage millions in assets for clients all over the Southeast. I have connections, resources. You're a retired teacher with arthritis and a dwindling bank account. Think about who's going to win this fight." His true colors finally revealed without pretense. "This isn't a fight, David," I said quietly. "It's a correction. And it's not about winning. It's about justice." "Justice," he scoffed. You sound like one of those daytime TV shows. Wake up, Mom. This is the real world. And in the real world, you've just destroyed your relationship with the only people who were willing to take you in. No, I countered. You destroyed that relationship when you decided to exploit me rather than respect me. Goodbye, David. Communicate through my lawyer from now on. I ended the call and set the phone down with trembling hands. It hurt. Of course, it hurt to hear such coldness from my own son. But beneath the pain was a growing sense of resolve. I had spent my life being strong for others. Now it was time to be strong for myself. That night, I slept fitfully, my conversation with David replaying in my mind. His final words, the cold calculation, the thinly veiled threat, had shown me a side of my son I'd never seen before. Or perhaps more accurately, a side I'd never allowed myself to see. Dawn found me sitting by the window of the transitional apartment, watching the sky lighten over the trees. There was a strange sense of calm in me now. The initial shock and hurt were still there, but beneath them ran a current of determination. David had made his choice. Now, I would make mine. I showered and dressed, then headed down to the community center's cafe for breakfast. Martha and Doris were already there, along with Walt and several others I'd met the previous day. You look like you didn't sleep well, Martha observed as I sat down with my coffee and toast. Is it that obvious? I attempted a smile. To these old eyes, yes. She patted my hand. Rough night? I spoke with my son, I admitted. It didn't go well. Walt frowned. Family conflicts are the hardest. No matter how right you are, it still hurts. Yes, I agreed softly. It does. Conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, a kindness for which I was grateful. These people understood that sometimes support meant not probing the wound. At 9 o'clock, Sarah Chen called to inform me that the formal demand letter had been delivered to David by courier that morning. He has 48 hours to provide complete documentation of all accounts opened with your funds, she explained. In the meantime, I've started the process to secure your pension and Social Security payments. What if he doesn't comply? I asked. Then we escalate, Sarah said simply. The county prosecutor's office has an elder fraud division. They take these cases very seriously. The thought of potential criminal charges against my own son was distressing, but I pushed the feeling aside. David had made his choices, and choices had consequences. After hanging up with Sarah, I decided to visit the bank where my CD was held. According to my records, the certificate of deposit from Henry's life insurance would mature next month. It wasn't a fortune, $75,000 plus accumulated interest, but it would provide me with immediate financial security while the larger issue of my house proceeds was being resolved. Jennifer offered to drive me, but I decided to take the bus instead. It was time I started relearning how to navigate independently. The bank was downtown, about a 20-minute ride from the community center. The financial district was a forest of glass and steel, so different from the tree-lined residential streets of my former life. As I entered the bank's marble lobby, I felt momentarily intimidated. I hadn't conducted serious financial business on my own in years. Henry had handled most of it during our marriage, and then David had stepped in after Henry's death, always insisting it was too complicated for me to worry about. I squared my shoulders and approached the customer service desk. I'd like to speak with someone about a certificate of deposit, please, I said to the young woman behind the counter. Certainly, ma'am. She smiled warmly. May I have your name? Eleanor Walsh. She typed something into her computer. And do you have an account number or any documentation with you? I pulled out a file folder from my purse, one of the few financial documents I'd kept in my possession, and handed her the original CD paperwork from 5 years ago. Perfect, she said after examining it. Let me get Mr. Gonzalez for you. He handles our certificate accounts. A few minutes later, I was seated in a small office with Ricardo Gonzalez, a pleasant middle-aged man with kind eyes and a reassuring manner. "Mrs. Walsh, I see your certificate is set to mature next month," he said, reviewing the information on his screen. "Were you planning to renew it or withdraw the funds?" "I'd like to understand my options," I replied. "I may need to access at least some of the money sooner than the maturity date." Mr. Gonzalez nodded. "That's certainly possible, though there would be an early withdrawal penalty of 6 months' interest. But before we discuss that, I noticed there's been a recent inquiry about this account." I frowned. "An inquiry? From whom?" He checked his computer. Again. "Let me see. Yes, 2 days ago, someone attempted to get information about this account by phone. They had your social security number and date of birth, but couldn't answer all the security questions correctly, so our representative didn't provide any information." My blood ran cold. 2 days ago, the same day I'd discovered the unauthorized withdrawals from my checking account and left David's house. "Was it my son?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I don't have the name here, but the call log indicates it was a male claiming to be calling on your behalf with your permission. When asked for the security word on the account, he couldn't provide it. The security word. I'd almost forgotten about that. When Henry and I had set up the account, we'd chosen a word that only the two of us would know. The name of the small island in Greece where we'd spent our honeymoon, a place we'd always planned to revisit but never had. "Amorgos," I whispered. "I'm sorry?" Mr. Gonzalez looked confused. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just realizing something. Mr. Gonzalez, I believe that call was made by my son without my knowledge or permission. I'm concerned he may try again or attempt to access other accounts of mine." His expression turned serious. "I understand. In that case, I'd recommend several security measures." He outlined options for placing additional protections on my accounts, including changing security questions, adding verbal passwords, and requiring in-person identification for all transactions. "I'd like to implement all of those," I said firmly. "Of course. And regarding the CD, given your concerns, would you like to close it today? As I mentioned, there would be a penalty, but the funds would be secure and available to you immediately." I considered this. The penalty would be substantial, several $1,000s in interest, but having immediate access to those funds would give me independence and options. "Yes," I decided. "I'd like to close it and open a new checking account here with those funds, one that only I can access." Mr. Gonzalez nodded. "We can certainly do that. Let me walk you through the process." 2 hours later, I left the bank with a new checking account containing just over $82,000, the CD balance minus the early withdrawal penalty. It wasn't the full amount from my house sale, but it was enough to rent an apartment, buy necessary furnishings, and support myself comfortably while the legal process to recover my other assets proceeded. I felt lighter somehow, more confident. For the first time since Henry's death, I had complete control over a significant financial resource. No one could access it but me. No one could make me feel guilty about how I chose to use it. It was freedom, in the most practical sense, as I waited at the bus stop to return to the community center. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Walsh? This is Detective Lisa Morales from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, Elder Crimes Unit. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart jumped. "Yes, of course. I'm calling because we received a report this morning regarding possible financial exploitation. Your son, David Walsh, came into the station claiming you're being manipulated by individuals at the Riverside Community Center who are trying to gain access to your assets." I nearly laughed out loud at the audacity. "Detective Morales, that is absolutely untrue. In fact, I've been working with Sarah Chen at Elder Justice Legal Services because I discovered my son has been exploiting me financially." There was a slight pause. "Yes, Ms. Chen contacted us yesterday to give us a heads up that she was representing you. That's why I wanted to speak with you directly. Would you be willing to come to the station to make a formal statement? Absolutely. When? Would this afternoon at 3 work for you? I'll be there, I assured her. After ending the call, I texted Sarah to let her know about the detective's call and my bank visit. She replied immediately, offering to meet me at the police station. Back at the community center, I sought out Jennifer to update her on the situation. My son went to the police, I told her. He's claiming you all are manipulating me to get my money. Jennifer didn't seem surprised. It's a common tactic, unfortunately. Abusers often try to paint themselves as the victims when they're caught. But don't worry, we have extensive documentation of everything we've done to assist you, and Detective Morales knows our organization well. You've dealt with this before, I observed. More times than I care to count, she admitted. Financial exploitation of seniors is far more common than most people realize, especially by family members. But the police and prosecutors in Charlotte take it seriously. Detective Morales in particular is a bulldog when it comes to protecting elderly victims. That was reassuring to hear. I'm meeting with her at 3. Sarah's going to join me. Would you like me to come as well? I'm happy to provide context about our services and your time here. That would be wonderful, I said gratefully. I feel like I'm assembling my own little army. Jennifer smiled. That's exactly what you're doing. No one should have to fight these battles alone. After lunch, I rested for a while in the apartment, gathering my strength for what promised to be an emotionally draining afternoon. Just as I was preparing to leave for the police station, my phone rang again. Karen, my former daughter-in-law. Eleanor? I thought you should know what happened last night. Is everything all right? The girls are fine, she assured me. Upset and confused, but physically fine. When I went to pick them up from David's, he tried to refuse to let them leave. Said it wasn't his night to give them up and accused me of conspiring with you against him. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm so sorry, Karen. Not your fault, she said firmly. Anyway, I reminded him that our custody agreement gives me the right to pick them up at any time if I have concerns about their well-being. He got belligerent, started shouting. Rebecca was in the background telling him to calm down, that the neighbors would hear. That sounds awful. It got worse. He grabbed Emma's arm when she tried to leave with me. Left a bruise. I've documented it and filed a report with Family Services. I gasped. He hurt Emma? My God, Karen, I never thought. I don't think he meant to hurt her, Karen said, though her voice was tight with anger. He was trying to stop her from leaving and grabbed too hard. But intent doesn't matter when you put your hands on a child like that. Of course not, I agreed, feeling sick. How is she doing? Physically, she's fine. A mild bruise, nothing. Serious, emotionally, she's angry. Said she always knew her dad could be mean about money, but never thought he'd hurt her. Sophie's just confused and upset. I've scheduled them both for sessions with their therapist tomorrow. I'd like to see them, if that's all right, I said. Not to discuss any of this, just to let them know I love them and this isn't their fault. They'd... Like that, Karen said. Maybe this weekend? Give things a chance to settle a bit. That sounds perfect. After ending the call with Karen, I sat on the edge of the bed, processing this new information. David had escalated from financial exploitation to physical aggression. The thought of him hurting Emma, even unintentionally, made my chest tight with distress. I had raised him better than this, or thought I had. Sarah picked me up at the community center at 2:30, and Jennifer joined us for the drive to the police station. During the ride, I filled them in on Karen's call. That adds another dimension to the case, Sarah noted. Family Services and the police communicate with each other. The fact that there's now documentation of physical aggression will make them take your financial exploitation claims even more seriously. The police station was a modern building of brick and glass. We were escorted to an interview room where Detective Morales was waiting for us. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with sharp brown eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Walsh," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming in. I understand you've had a difficult few days." "That's putting it mildly," I admitted. Detective Morales introduced her partner, Detective Wilson, a middle-aged black man with a kind face but watchful eyes. They recorded my statement as I detailed everything that had happened: the sale of my house, the move to David's, the gradual shift in how I was treated, the discovery of unauthorized withdrawals, and my inability to access the investment accounts holding the bulk of my assets. "And you never intended to give your son control of these funds?" Detective Wilson clarified. "Absolutely not," I stated firmly. "I trusted him to help me manage them, not to take control of them. There's a significant difference." "Indeed, there is," Detective Morales agreed. "Now, I understand your son came in this morning with quite a different story. He claims you're suffering from early dementia and have been manipulated by staff at the Riverside Community Center." Jennifer spoke up then, providing details about the center's programs and their protocols for assisting seniors in crisis. She explained how I had come to them seeking information and how they had connected me with legal services. "We've worked with Elder Justice Legal Services for over a decade," she explained. "Their entire mission is protecting seniors from exploitation, not exploiting them." Sarah provided additional context about my case from a legal perspective, including the formal demand letter that had been sent to David that morning. "Has there been any response to that letter?" Detective Morales asked. "Not yet," Sarah replied. "The deadline is tomorrow morning." Detective Wilson made some notes. "Mrs. Walsh, did your son ever have you sign a power of attorney document or anything similar?" I thought carefully. "He presented many documents when we were setting up the investment accounts. I can't say with absolute certainty what all of them were, but I never knowingly signed a power of attorney." "We'll need to obtain copies of everything." "You did sign," Detective Morales said. "That may require a subpoena depending on your son's cooperation." The interview continued for nearly 2 hours, covering every aspect of my financial situation and my relationship with David. The detectives were thorough but respectful, never making me feel as though they doubted my account or my competence. "What happens now?" I asked as the interview concluded. "We've opened a formal investigation," Detective Morales explained. "We'll be reviewing bank records, account documents, and interviewing other parties involved, including your son. Based on what we find, the case may be referred to the district attorney for criminal charges." "Criminal charges," I echoed softly. The reality of what was happening, that my own son might face prosecution because of his actions, hit me anew. Detective Morales seemed to sense my distress. "Mrs. Walsh, I understand this is extremely difficult. Many victims of elder exploitation feel guilty about coming forward, especially when the perpetrator is family. But what your son did, if the evidence confirms your account, is a crime. And crimes have consequences." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." "One more thing," Detective Wilson added. "We were notified this afternoon about an incident report involving your granddaughter Emma. Are you aware of what happened last night?" "Karen, my former daughter-in-law, called me earlier today. She said David grabbed Emma's arm and left a bruise when she tried to leave with her mother." The detectives exchanged glances. "That incident will be investigated separately by Family Services," Detective Morales explained. "But it does establish a pattern of escalating behavior that concerns us in relation to your case." By the time we left the police station, the sun was beginning to set. I felt emotionally drained, but also oddly liberated. The truth was out. The wheels of justice were turning. Whatever happened next, I had taken back control of my narrative. Sarah drove me back to the community center, with Jennifer in the front passenger seat. "You did really well today, Eleanor," Sarah said. "Detective Morales is the best in the department for these cases. She won't let this drop. Thank you both, I said sincerely. I couldn't have done any of this without your support. That's what community is for, Jennifer replied. To hold each other up when things get tough. Back at the transitional apartment, I found a note had been slipped under my door. It was from Martha. Dinner in my apartment at 7 if you're up for company. Nothing. Fancy, just soup and friendship. Apt 3C. I smiled at the thoughtfulness. After the intensity of the day, quiet company with a new friend seemed perfect. Martha's apartment was similar to mine, but personalized with colorful throws, photographs, and bookshelves crammed with well-worn paperbacks. Doris was already there, helping to set the table. Just in time, Martha greeted me warmly. The soup's just about ready, nothing fancy, just vegetable barley, and there's fresh bread from the bakery down the street. It smells wonderful, I said truthfully. Thank you for including me. Over dinner, I shared an abbreviated version of my day, including the police interview and the disturbing news about Emma. That poor child, Martha said, shaking her head. But I'm not surprised he escalated to physical aggression. Once these types start to lose control of the situation, they often lash out. I just never thought David would... I trailed off, still unable to reconcile the son I thought I knew with his recent actions. People show you who they are when they're under pressure, Doris observed, not who they pretend to be when everything's going their way. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, and for a while, I was able to simply enjoy the meal and the company. It had been years since I'd had friends like this. Women my own age who understood me without explanation, who offered support without judgment. After dinner, I helped with the dishes despite Martha's protests. I'm not an invalid, I insisted. And it feels good to be useful. Well, in that case, you can dry, Martha conceded, handing me a dish towel. As we worked side by side at the sink, Martha asked quietly, Have you thought about what comes next? After the legal issues are settled, I mean. I'm not sure, I admitted. I had planned to find a senior apartment near David's house to be close to the girls. But now, I shrugged. I don't know if staying in Charlotte makes sense anymore. The girls could still visit you wherever you end up, Doris pointed out from her spot at the table. Especially as they get older. Teenagers are pretty mobile. These days. That's true, I agreed. And Karen seems supportive of maintaining our relationship. You should think about staying close to the community center, Martha suggested. There's a nice senior living complex just 3 blocks away. Independent apartments with optional services. Several of us live there. Including me, Doris added. The rent's reasonable, location's great, and they don't treat you like you've got one foot in the grave. Plus, you'd have a built-in support system. The idea was appealing. I'll look into it, I promised. Once I know more about my financial situation. By the time I returned to my temporary apartment, it was nearly 10 o'clock. I felt exhausted, but strangely at peace. The day had been challenging, but I had faced it with courage and clarity. That counted for something. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Rebecca. Eleanor, please call me when you get this. We need to talk. Privately. I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. What could Rebecca possibly have to say to me privately at this point? Was it a genuine outreach or another manipulation tactic? Before I could decide, a second message arrived. It's important. It's about where the money really went. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could ignore the messages. I could forward them to Sarah or Detective Morales. But something, curiosity perhaps, or the lingering hope that there might be an explanation that made sense of all this, made me type a response. I'm not comfortable speaking by phone. If you have information about my money, you should share it with the police or with my lawyer. Her reply came almost instantly. I can't go to the police. David would know it was me. But you deserve to know the truth. Can we meet somewhere neutral? Tomorrow, just for 15 minutes. I hesitated, then typed, "I'll think about it and let you know tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone and placed it on the nightstand. Sleep came surprisingly easily that night, deep and dreamless. Perhaps my mind and body had simply reached their limits for processing stress and shock. Morning brought clarity. After consulting with Sarah, who was concerned but understood my need for answers, I agreed to meet Rebecca at a coffee shop near the community center at 10 a.m. Sarah would be seated at a nearby table, within earshot but not obviously with me. "If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just use our signal," she reminded me. The signal was simple, asking for more sugar for my coffee. "And remember, you don't have to engage with anything manipulative. You're there for information only." The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, the morning rush just beginning to taper off. I chose a table near the back with a good view of the entrance and ordered a cup of tea. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, taking a seat at a table across the room, her laptop open as if she were just another customer working remotely. Rebecca arrived precisely at 10, looking harried and tense. Her normally perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, hair hastily pulled back, minimal makeup, wrinkled blouse. She ordered a large coffee and joined me at the table, glancing nervously around the room. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. "I know you have every reason not to trust me right now." "You said you had information about my money," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm listening." Rebecca wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, knuckles whitening with the pressure. "David isn't just in financial trouble, Eleanor. He's in legal trouble too. Has been for months, but he kept it from everyone, including me." I waited, saying, "Nothing. Last year, he started making unauthorized trades with client funds," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was trying to cover losses from some bad investments he'd made with our personal money. He thought he could replace the client funds before anyone noticed, but he was caught." I finished for her. She nodded miserably. "The investment firm's internal audit found discrepancies. They confronted him 3 months ago, right around the time you moved in with us. They gave him a choice: repay everything immediately, or face criminal charges and lose his license. The timing suddenly made sense. David's intense interest in having me sell my house and move in with them had coincided precisely with this crisis. So my house proceeds," I began. "We're used to replace the client funds," Rebecca confirmed. "All of it. The investment accounts he claimed to have set up for you don't exist, Eleanor. He used your money to save himself from prison." The shock of it hit me like a physical blow. Not just financial exploitation, but outright theft. And not just from me, from his professional clients as well. The scale of the deception was staggering. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Because I didn't know the full extent of it until yesterday. I knew we had financial problems, and I knew he was desperate for you to sell your house. But he told me it was because of market downturns and bad investments. Not embezzlement." She choked on the word. "When the police came asking questions yesterday after you filed your report, I started digging. Found documents he'd hidden from me too. So you're trying to distance yourself," I observed, perhaps more coldly than I intended. "Make sure you don't go down with him," she flinched. "Partly, yes. I won't pretend this is purely altruistic, but also because what he did to you was wrong. What we both did. The cleaning job, the pressure, treating you like a burden. I went along with all of it because I was scared and desperate too. But that doesn't make it right." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." "There's more," Rebecca said after a moment. "David's planning to leave the country. He has a flight booked to Belize tomorrow night. One-way ticket, in his name only." That was shocking. "He's running? What about you? What about the girls?" "He says he'll send for me once he's established there. As for the girls..." She broke off, shaking her head. "I don't think they factor into his plans anymore." Not really. The David I thought I married wouldn't have grabbed Emma hard enough to bruise her. Wouldn't have stolen from his own mother. Have you told the police about the flight? I asked. Not yet. I came to you first. I thought you deserved to know everything before I did that. He's still your son. I sat back, processing this flood of new information. My money was gone. Not just temporarily inaccessible, but actually gone. Used to cover up my son's professional crimes. And now he was planning to flee the country, abandoning his wife, his children, and the consequences of his actions. The police need to know, I said finally. About all of it. The embezzlement, the flight. And you need to tell them everything. You've just told me. Rebecca nodded, wiping away tears. I know. I will. I needed to face you first, to apologize, even though I know it doesn't fix anything. I studied her for a long moment. There was genuine remorse in her eyes, mixed with fear and exhaustion. Whether it was remorse for her actions or simply fear of consequences, I couldn't fully tell. But in that moment, I felt an unexpected flicker of compassion. Rebecca was a victim of David's deception too, albeit one who had participated in harming me. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said finally. It doesn't erase what happened, but it does help me understand. She nodded again, seemingly unable to speak. After a moment, she reached into her purse and withdrew a small leather pouch. I brought these for you too. I know it's not much compared to what you've lost, but... She slid the pouch across the table. Inside were several pieces of jewelry, my mother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings Henry had given me for our 30th anniversary, a sapphire bracelet I'd inherited from my grandmother. Items I had been told were being kept safe in David and Rebecca's home safe. Items I had feared I would never see again. I took them from the safe this morning, Rebecca explained. David doesn't know. He was planning to sell them before he left. My throat tightened with emotion as I gently touched the pearls. These weren't just valuable objects. They were tangible connections to my past, to people I had loved and lost. Thank you, I whispered. Rebecca stood abruptly. I should go. I'm meeting Detective Morales at 11. She hesitated, then added softly, I truly am sorry, Eleanor. As she turned to leave, I found myself saying, Rebecca. She paused, looking back at me. Be careful. For your own sake. She gave me a sad smile and nodded before walking away. Sarah joined me at the table as soon as Rebecca had left the coffee shop. I heard everything, she said. This changes the legal strategy considerably. I nodded, still absorbing the implications. The money's gone. Really gone. If what she said is true about David using it to cover up embezzlement, that elevates this from elder exploitation to criminal conspiracy, Sarah explained. It also brings in federal authorities since it involves securities fraud. And it means I probably won't recover much of it, I said, facing the reality squarely. Not directly from David, no, Sarah agreed. But there might be other avenues. The investment firm may have insurance that could cover some of your losses, especially if they can establish that your funds were used to reimburse their clients. And if David has any other assets? I doubt there's much left, I said. Not if he was desperate enough to steal from clients and from me. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This is a setback, Eleanor, but not the end. You still have the CD funds, your pension, and Social Security. You're not destitute. No, I agreed. I'm not destitute, just betrayed in the worst possible way by the person I should have been able to trust the most. The enormity of it washed over me then. Not just the financial loss, but the complete shattering of the relationship I had valued above all others. My son, my only child, had stolen from me, lied to me, treated me as nothing more than a solution to his self-created problems. And now he was planning to abandon everything, including his own children, to escape the consequences. In that moment, I made a decision. I want to speak with Detective Morales today, before David has a chance to leave the country. Sarah nodded. I'll call her office right now. As she stepped away to make the call, I sat quietly, the leather pouch with my recovered jewelry clutched in my hands. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be police interviews, possibly court testimony, difficult conversations with my granddaughters, and the challenge of rebuilding my life at 73. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I saw with perfect clarity what I needed to do. The truth, however painful, was preferable to comforting lies. Justice, however imperfect, was preferable to enabling wrongdoing. And my own dignity and independence, however hard-won, were worth fighting for. David had made his choices. Now I would make mine. Detective Morales agreed to meet me that afternoon. Sarah drove me to the police station, where we were ushered into the same interview room as before. Rebecca was just leaving as we arrived, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She didn't speak, just gave me a small nod as we passed each other in the hallway. Detective Morales looked grim but determined as she welcomed us. Mrs. Walsh, thank you for coming in. I've just finished speaking with your daughter-in-law. She's provided some very concerning information. She told me everything, I said, about David's embezzlement from his clients, his plan to flee the country. The detective nodded. We're working with the FBI now since the securities fraud crosses state lines. They've already placed a hold on your son's passport, so he won't be boarding any flights to Belize or anywhere else. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Relief that David wouldn't escape justice, but also deep sadness that it had come to this. My son, a fugitive stopped at the border. My son, facing federal charges. What happens now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. We're executing a search warrant at your son's home and office as we speak, Detective Morales explained. Based on Mrs. Walsh's statement and the evidence she provided, we've also frozen all of his financial accounts. The FBI has agents at his office reviewing client records. Sarah leaned forward. What about recovery of Eleanor's assets? The money from her house sale? Detective Morales's expression softened slightly. That's going to be more complicated. If, as Mrs. Walsh the younger states, those funds were used to replace stolen client money, they've effectively been dispersed. However, she added, seeing my face fall, there are victim compensation programs for financial crimes, particularly those targeting seniors. And any assets seized from your son through criminal proceedings could potentially be used for restitution. I understand, I said quietly. The money, nearly a lifetime of savings wrapped up in that house, was likely gone. I would need to adjust to a new financial reality. There's one more thing, Detective Morales continued. We'd like your permission to access your medical records. I frowned, confused. My medical records? Why? Your son has been claiming you're experiencing cognitive decline, early-stage dementia. He's using that as his defense, saying you gave him full control of your finances because you knew you couldn't manage them yourself. We need to disprove that claim. The audacity of it took my breath away. Even now, David was trying to paint me as incompetent, to rob me not just of my money but of my dignity, my agency, my very self. Absolutely, I said, anger burning through the shock. Access whatever you need. I had my annual physical 3 months ago, including cognitive screening. Everything was normal. Detective Morales nodded. Excellent. That will be helpful. Now, there's one more difficult topic we need to discuss. Your granddaughters. My heart clenched. Are they all right? They're safe with their mother, she assured me. But given everything that's happened, Family Services is recommending they receive counseling. They've been caught in the middle of this situation, and there's concern about the emotional impact. Of course, I agreed immediately. Whatever. They need. Can I see them? That's up to their mother, but there's no legal reason you can't. In fact, Maintaining positive relationships with stable family members would be beneficial for them right now. Sarah and I left the police station an hour later, my head spinning with legal terminology, potential timelines, and next steps. The stark reality was setting in. This wasn't going to be a quick resolution. The investigation, possible trial, and attempts to recover assets could take months or even years. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked as we walked to her car. That was a lot to process. "I'm not sure all right is the word," I admitted, "but I'm still standing." "You're doing more than standing, Eleanor. You're fighting back. That takes enormous courage." Back at the community center, I found a message waiting for me. Karen had called, asking me to call her back at my convenience. With a sense of trepidation, I returned her call from the privacy of my temporary apartment. "Eleanor," she sounded relieved. "I was hoping you'd call. The girls are asking to see you." "I'd love to see them," I said immediately. "Detective Morales mentioned they might need counseling. Yes, we have an appointment tomorrow, but they're worried about you too. They keep asking if you're okay, where you're staying, if you're coming back to David's house." "What have you told them?" Karen sighed. "The truth, in age-appropriate terms. That their father made some bad decisions about money, including using your money without permission. That he's in trouble with the police now. That you're staying somewhere safe while it all gets sorted out." "Thank you for being honest with them," I said. So many adults try to shield children from difficult truths, but in my experience as a teacher, kids usually sense when something's wrong anyway. The unknown is often scarier than the truth. "That's exactly what their therapist said," Karen agreed. "Listen, would you be up for dinner at our house tomorrow night? Nothing fancy, just the four of us. The girls would love to see you, and honestly, I could use the adult company too. This has been, well, a lot." "I'd like that very much," I said, feeling a small spark of warmth amid the cold reality of the day. That evening, I joined Martha, Doris, and several others for dinner in the community center's cafe. Word had spread about the developments in my case, not the details, which I kept private, but the general fact that my son was now facing criminal charges. The support was palpable, no one offering platitudes or forced optimism, just quiet solidarity and practical help. "Walt's nephew is a real estate agent who specializes in senior housing," Martha mentioned as we finished our meal. "He's offered to show you some options whenever you're ready. No pressure or obligation. And my daughter's a financial advisor, a legitimate one," Doris added pointedly. "She's happy to give you a consultation, help you figure out how to stretch what you have." "You're all so kind," I said, genuinely touched. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." "That's what community is for," Walt said simply. "None of us can go it alone, especially at our age." Later, as I prepared for bed, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at me seemed different somehow. Older, in some ways, with new lines of strain around the eyes and mouth, but also stronger, more resolved. I thought about all that had happened in just a few short days, how quickly my life had changed course. A week ago, I had been living in my son's house, gradually shrinking myself to take up less space, less air, less resources. Accepting subtle slights and not so subtle exploitation, because I believed that's what a good mother did, sacrificed for her children, even when it hurt. Now I was standing on my own, fighting for justice, rebuilding from ruins. It wasn't the retirement I had envisioned, but there was dignity in it, and truth, and even a kind of freedom. I slept fitfully that night, waking several times from dreams where David was a little boy again, calling for me, needing me. The mind plays cruel tricks, especially at night. Each time I had to remind myself of the reality. The son I loved so deeply had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The little boy was gone, replaced by a man who had made choices I could never have imagined. Morning brought a text message from Karen. Girls are excited to see you tonight. 6 p.m., okay? Address: 1542 Maple Lane. I replied with my acceptance. Then, spent the day with Sarah and the financial investigator, going through what records I had and creating a comprehensive timeline of events. It was painstaking, emotionally draining work, revisiting each betrayal, each manipulation. "You're doing great," Sarah encouraged me during a break. "I know this is difficult, but the more thorough we are now, the stronger the case will be." Late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted, but determined to be present and positive for my granddaughters. Jennifer helped me arrange transportation to Karen's house, a modest ranch-style home in a pleasant neighborhood about 20 minutes from the community center. Karen greeted me at the door with a warm hug. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "The girls have been watching the window for the last hour." As if on cue, Emma and Sophie appeared in the hallway behind their mother. For a moment they hesitated, perhaps unsure how to act in this strange new reality where their grandmother no longer lived with their father. Then Sophie, always the more impulsive of the two, ran forward and threw her arms around my waist. "Grandma, we missed you so much." Emma followed more slowly, but her hug was just as fierce. I noticed she kept her bruised arm slightly protected, and my heart ached anew at what she had experienced. "I've missed you too," I told them, fighting back tears. "So very much." Dinner was simple: spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, a salad, but the conversation was anything but. The girls had questions, so many questions. Karen had prepared them for this, encouraging them to ask what they wanted to know, but warning them that some topics might be too difficult or complex. "Where are you living now, Grandma?" Sophie asked as we sat down to eat. "I'm staying temporarily at a community center for seniors," I explained. "They have a small apartment I can use while I figure out what comes next." "Is it nice there?" Emma wanted to know. "Do you have friends?" "It is nice," I assured her. "And yes, I've made some wonderful friends already. There's Martha, who used to be a librarian, and Doris, who was a lawyer, and Walt, who teaches chess to children at the local school." "That's good," Emma said, looking relieved. "I was worried you were all alone." "Not alone at all," I promised. "Her." The harder questions came later, as Karen served ice cream for dessert. "Is Dad going to jail?" Sophie asked suddenly, her spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. Karen and I exchanged glances. "We don't know yet, sweetheart," Karen answered honestly. "Your dad made some serious mistakes, and there are consequences for those kinds of mistakes. But the legal process takes time." "He told us you stole money from him," Emma said, looking at me directly. "But that wasn't true, was it?" "No," I said firmly. "That wasn't true. Your father took money that belonged to me without my permission, and he did the same thing at his job, which is why he's in trouble with the police." "Why would he lie about you?" Sophie's voice was small, confused. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes when people do things they know are wrong, they try to blame others instead of taking responsibility. It doesn't mean they're bad people all the way through, but it does mean they've made bad choices. "Dad made a lot of bad choices," Emma observed with the startling clarity children sometimes possess. "Yes," I agreed sadly. "He did." "Are you still our grandma?" Sophie asked, and the question nearly broke my heart. "Oh, sweetheart." I reached across the table to take her hand. "I will always be your grandma. Nothing could ever change that. Not where I live, not what happens with your dad. Not anything in this world. Promise?" Her eyes were wide, vulnerable. "I promise with all my heart." After the girls went upstairs to finish homework, Karen and I sat in her small living room with cups of tea. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being so honest with them but also so compassionate. They needed that." "They're remarkable girls," I said. "You've done a wonderful job with them." Karen smiled sadly. "I've tried. It hasn't been easy, especially with David undermining me at every turn. Did you know he told them I left him because I was bored with family life? Not because he was embezzling from our joint accounts and cheating with his assistant. I winced. I'm sorry, Karen. I had no idea things were that bad. Water under the bridge now, she sighed. But I worry about the example he set for the girls, about money, about honesty, about how to treat people you're supposed to love. They have you, I pointed out, and they have other influences in their lives, teachers, friends, and if you're willing, they'll still have me. I'm more than willing, Karen assured me. You've always been good for them. And honestly, I could use the support. Being a single mom to 2 teenage girls isn't easy. I raised David alone from the time he was 7, I reminded her. I know how challenging it can be. A shadow crossed her face. Do you have any idea where it went wrong with him? How he turned out this way despite your best efforts? It was a question I had been asking myself constantly. I wish I knew, I admitted. I tried to teach him values, honesty, compassion, responsibility. Somewhere along the way, he chose a different path. Maybe it was losing his father so young. Maybe it was the material success he found in his career, the pressure to maintain appearances. Or maybe some people just have something missing inside them, a moral compass that never fully develops. Nature versus nurture, Karen mused. Exactly. And in the end, all we can do is our best. The rest is up to them. When it was time to leave, the girls came down to say goodbye, extracting promises that I would visit again soon. Next time you could stay for a movie night, Sophie suggested. Mom makes the best popcorn. I'd love that, I told her. Emma hugged. Me last, holding on a bit longer than usual. I'm sorry Dad took your money, Grandma, she whispered. It wasn't fair. No, it wasn't, I agreed. But I'm going to be okay. And so are you. As Karen drove me back to the community center, she mentioned that she had spoken with Sarah Chen earlier that day. She seems very competent. She thinks there might be a possibility of recovering some assets through the firm's insurance. That would be helpful, I acknowledged. But I'm trying to prepare myself for the likelihood that most of it is gone for good. What will you do? Karen asked. If you don't mind me asking. Start over, I said simply. Find an affordable place. To live, budget carefully with my pension and Social Security, perhaps look for some part-time work that suits my abilities. I won't have the retirement I planned, but I'll manage. Karen was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, I teach 3rd grade at Westfield Elementary. We've been looking for a reading specialist to work with struggling students 3 mornings a week. The pay isn't much, but it's perfect for a retired teacher. If you're interested, I might be, I said, surprised but pleased by the offer. Once things settle down a bit. The offer will still be there, she assured me. No rush. Back at the community center, I found an envelope had been slipped under my door. Inside was a short note from Jennifer. Detective Morales called. David was arrested today. She'll call you tomorrow with details. I sat on the edge of the bed, the note trembling slightly in my hand. Arrested. My son. The words seemed impossible together, like they belonged to some alternate reality, not the life I had lived for 73 years. Yet here we were. I didn't sleep much that night, my mind racing with questions and memories. Dawn found me sitting by the window again, watching the sky lighten and trying to find peace with what couldn't be changed. Detective Morales called shortly after 8. Mrs. Walsh, I wanted to update you personally. Your son was arrested yesterday evening on multiple charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, elder financial exploitation, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. Where is he now? I asked, my voice hollow. In federal custody. His arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning. And Rebecca? She's cooperating fully with the investigation. At this point, she hasn't been charged, though that could change as we learn more about her level of involvement. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. What happens next? The legal process will move forward, given the evidence we've uncovered. So far, including documents from your son's office and home, the case against him is strong. Most likely, his attorney will seek a plea deal to avoid a trial. Will I need to testify? Possibly, though if he accepts a plea, it might not be necessary. Either way, we'll keep you informed every step of the way. After ending the call, I sat for a long time, letting the reality settle around me. My son was in jail. He would likely go to prison. The money from my house was gone. My future was uncertain. Yet strangely, beneath the sorrow and anxiety, I felt something else stirring, a quiet determination, a sense of purpose. This was not how I had imagined my final years, but perhaps there was meaning to be found even in this painful path. Over the next few weeks, a new routine began to emerge. 3 days a week, I volunteered at the community center, helping with administrative tasks and occasionally teaching a creative writing class for seniors. The work gave structure to my days and a sense of contribution. Sarah continued to guide me through the legal process, which ground forward with the ponderous pace of all bureaucracies. David had indeed sought a plea deal, accepting responsibility for most charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. I chose not to attend his sentencing, sending a written victim impact statement instead. I couldn't bear to see him led away in handcuffs, whatever he had done. Rebecca filed for divorce and moved back to her hometown in Tennessee. Before leaving Charlotte, she came to see me one last time, returning a few more personal items she had salvaged from the house: photo albums, my teaching awards, Henry's pocket watch. "I truly am sorry, Eleanor," she said as we sat in the community center's garden. "For everything." "I believe you are," I told her. "What will you do now?" "Start over. My parents are letting me stay with them while I figure things out. Maybe go back to school, finish the interior design degree I abandoned when I married David." "That sounds wise," I said. There was no point in bitterness now. Rebecca had been manipulated too, in her own way. Karen kept her word about the girls, making sure they visited me regularly. Movie nights became a monthly tradition, sometimes at her house, sometimes in the apartment I eventually rented at Riverside Seniors, the complex Martha had mentioned, just 3 blocks from the community center. It was small but comfortable. Within my budget, thanks to an unexpected development, the investment firm where David had worked reached a settlement with me, acknowledging their failure to properly supervise his activities. It wasn't the full amount I had lost, but it was enough to supplement my modest income and ensure I wouldn't need to worry about basic necessities. 6 months after that fateful morning when I had received Rebecca's text about the cleaning job, I sat in the community center's garden with Martha and Doris, enjoying the spring sunshine. Walt joined us later, carrying a chess set and a twinkle in his eye. "Anyone for a game?" he asked, looking at me with particular hopefulness. "I haven't played in years," I demurred, though with less conviction than before. "Perfect time to relearn," he said, echoing his words from months ago. This time, I agreed. As we set up the pieces, Martha leaned over to whisper, "I told you he was sweet on you." I felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the sunshine. At 73, I had not expected to find friendship, community, or possibly even romance. I had thought those chapters of my life were closed. But life, I was learning, had a way of opening unexpected doors just when others slammed shut. Later that evening, I sat at the small desk in my apartment, opening my laptop to continue the memoir I had begun writing. I had always loved books, always dreamed of writing one someday. Somehow, retirement had never seemed the right time. There was always something else to do, someone else to care for. Now, I wrote for an hour each evening, chronicling not just the recent painful events, but the whole arc of my life, the young, Single mother struggling to raise a son alone, the dedicated teacher shaping young minds for 35 years, the widow finding her way forward, and now, the woman rebuilding after betrayal. My story wasn't finished yet. There would be more challenges, more joys, more unexpected turns in the road ahead. But I was no longer afraid to face them on my own terms. My son had said he wouldn't feed extra mouths, had tried to use me for financial gain and free labor. For a brief moment, I had smiled and accepted it, believing that's what mothers do. Sacrifice everything, even their dignity, for their children. But the next day, I had found the courage to say no, to value myself, to demand respect. It wasn't the choice I had wanted to make, but it was the right one. As I typed the final words of the day's writing session, I thought about something Henry used to say whenever we faced hardship. It's not about what happens to you, Ellie. It's about what you do next. What I did next was survive. What I did next was thrive. And that, in the end, was enough. The following summer, I stood at the front of a small classroom at Westfield Elementary, working with a group of third graders who struggled with reading. Karen had made good on her offer of part-time work, and 3 mornings a week, I helped young minds unlock the magic of words. Sound it out, I encouraged a small boy with serious eyes and a determined frown. You've got this, Marcus. He struggled. Through the sentence, each word a small victory. When he finished, his face lit up with pride. I did it, Ms. Eleanor. You certainly did, I agreed, matching his enthusiasm. That's the power of persistence. Later, as I walked the few blocks from the school to my apartment, I reflected on that word, persistence. It had become something of a mantra for me this past year. Persisting through loss, through betrayal, through reinvention. At my apartment building, I collected my mail from the lobby and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Among the usual bills and flyers was a letter from the Federal Correctional Institution where David was serving his 5-year sentence. I recognized his handwriting immediately. I had received several letters from him over the past months. The first few I had returned unopened, the wound still too raw. Eventually, I had started reading them, his initial anger giving way to excuses, then to a kind of performative remorse that never quite rang true. This one I sensed would be different. The envelope was thicker, the address written with more care. Even so, I set it aside on my kitchen counter, making a cup of tea first, giving myself time to prepare emotionally for whatever it contained. Finally, I sat down at my small dining table, opened the envelope, and began to read. Dear Mom, it began, the familiar salutation bringing a pang to my heart. I've started and discarded a dozen versions of this letter. None of them seemed right. How do you apologize for destroying someone's life, especially when that someone is your mother? There's no Hallmark card for, sorry I stole your life savings and tried to flee the country. My therapist here, yes, I'm in therapy, mandatory, but still says I need to take full responsibility without excuses or justification. So here it is. I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I stole from you. I lied to you. I manipulated you. I treated you as a resource rather than a person, let alone my mother. And when caught, I tried to paint you as confused and incompetent, rather than admit what I had done. There's no excuse for any of it. Not the financial pressure I was under, not the fear of losing my license, not the lifestyle I couldn't afford but was too proud to scale back. Nothing justifies what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't, or wouldn't, see before. The depth of the harm I caused. Not just financially, but emotionally. I took advantage of your love and trust in the most terrible way. Emma and Sophie visited last month. Karen has been remarkably gracious about maintaining that connection, more than I deserve. They told me about your new apartment, your volunteer work, the reading program at their school. They said you seem happy. I hope that's true. I have 3 more years here, minimum. I'm using the time to try to understand how I went so wrong, how I justified such horrible choices to myself. The answers aren't comforting. I was selfish, entitled, morally weak, but at least they're honest. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again. That's for you to decide, and I'll respect whatever you choose. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the full extent of what I did, and I am truly, deeply sorry. Your son, David. I set the letter down, tears blurring my vision. It was the first genuine communication I'd had from my son in over a year. No manipulation, no self-pity, just raw acknowledgement of the harm he had caused. Was it enough? Could anything ever be enough to repair what had been broken? I didn't. No. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment but a process, and I was still very much in the middle of it. What I did know was that I had built a new life from the ashes of the old one. I had found community, purpose, even joy again. I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had reclaimed: my independence, my dignity, my future. That evening, I joined Walt, Martha, and Doris for dinner at the small Italian restaurant around the corner from our apartment building. We had become something of a foursome over the past months, supporting each other through health scares and family dramas, celebrating birthdays and small victories, filling the gaps that time and loss had created in our lives. You seem thoughtful. Tonight, Eleanor, Walt observed as we shared a tiramisu for dessert. I heard from David today, I said simply. They exchanged glances, these friends who had held me up during the darkest days. And how did that go? Martha asked gently. It was unexpected, I admitted. For the first time, he seemed genuinely remorseful. No excuses, no self-pity. That's a start, Doris observed. Not the end, but a start. Yes, I agreed. A start. Walt reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Whatever you decide about David, we're here. You know that, right? I smiled at him, at all of them. These people who had become my chosen family when my biological one had fractured. I do know that, and it makes all the difference. Later, as Walt walked me to my door, he hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to go to the symphony with me next weekend? They're doing Beethoven's Ninth." "I'd like that very much," I told him, and meant it. Inside my apartment, I went to the small desk by the window and opened my laptop. The memoir I'd been working on glowed on the screen, the cursor blinking at the end of the last paragraph I'd written. I added a new line. Sometimes the most painful endings make way for the most unexpected beginnings. Life rarely follows the script we've written for it. The art of living well lies not in avoiding the rewrites, but in approaching them with courage, dignity, and openness to possibility. I sat back, satisfied with the words. They weren't just for the page. They were the truth I was living every day. My son had said he wouldn't feed extra mouths, had tried to use me as an unpaid servant and financial resource. I had smiled and briefly accepted it. But the next day, I had chosen a different path. One of truth, justice, and self-respect. It hadn't been easy. It wouldn't always be easy going forward. But as I looked around my small, peaceful apartment at the life I had built from the ground up at 73, I knew with absolute certainty I had made the right choice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.